Thanks for having me. It's my first time that I'm at Halfstack, so yeah, actually, let's be honest, the first time that I'm on such a big stage. Okay, everybody heard that. Was wondering why the cash register is here, mystery solved. I thought they were gonna cash us for something.
I'll take care of that during the break, sorry.
Yeah, anyway, I like it. It's a nice prop. Okay. Well, this is my title slide. And we're going to slowly go into the topic that I'm going to present today. But first things first, a few words about myself. My name is Timea. I'm from Transylvania, Romania, hence the picture. I own a a dog. And yeah, I'm a software engineer, all the track record, over a decade of professional experience. And at the time, I landed a job at the moment actually a Java software engineer at a company called Inrupt. And yeah, you're gonna know a little bit about the company maybe also later because the technical topic is sort of related. And some of you might know me. In my free time, I used to do some community work here locally, organizing conferences, women tech makers, part of the Google developer group. Yeah, so that's more or less me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's my preferred social platform these days. Okay, to introduce the topic of today, I'm a sucker for watching Netflix and basically everything that streams, episodes, movies, you name it. I probably spend 20% of my time on watching movies and series. And any of you have watched Black Mirror? Okay. Have you seen this particular episode? Awesome. So if you haven't, I do have an introductory explanation of the episode. Let's see.
We witnessed the demise of Joan as she came to learn that the Netflix-style platform called Streamberry was making a dramatic series that was based on her life. Something that she didn't even know that she signed up for, as it was part of the terms of service to the platform that she agreed to. Due to the information that was revealed in the fictional show that was being aired, which mirrored her life, it caused her to lose her partner, her job, and enter a state where she was obsessed with seeing what was going to happen. The episodes were churned out so fast and it was extremely reactive, meaning that she could do something in reality and then it would appear on the screen a matter of moments later. This was due to the source of the technology in the episode. So the technology was a computer, something which was extremely advanced. It was an AI tool that was able to write, shoot, edit, and create digitally imposed shows that mirrored exactly what was happening in real life in a matter of moments, instead of the months and potentially years that it could take humans to do. How? Well, by the use of the tech that companies in the modern day and our world use when they serve us advertising. The speech recognition on our phones and everything that we search. This episode of Black Mirror took that intrusive feeling that we get when we get served ads online and it took it to another level, showing that in a future that could not be that far away, it could become some kind of a reality.
Yeah, so that was Joan. And
we witnessed the demise of...
Okay, we've seen this. Next.
We witnessed the demise of...
So I think this is, as Black Mirror episodes go, they are very out there, very to the extreme. But I think it still proves a very interesting point because me, the user of all this technology and all the services around me, do have this horror scenario in my mind. So what happened to Joan? She, when she subscribed to the streaming platform of Streamberry, she simply accepted the privacy policy, and that's what landed her a real-life show on the streaming platform. I mean, how many of us read the privacy policies? Like, really? One person? Great. How helpful is it? Yeah. Okay, and then how did they get all the data about her? Well, from all her devices, geolocation, video recordings, audio recordings, and the computer meshed everything together and created an almost real-time show about her that she could watch basically on the streaming platform. It's a very daunting episode, I would say. And, you know, is it all possible is the question. Obviously not to the full extent of it, but a lot of parts of it are already possible. And we as developers probably know. And I think this, for example, makes me think about Metropolis in 1927, which was also about computers and robots taking on the world and the fear that the user potentially could have because of the technology. I just don't think that's the solution here. So, okay, what's the solution? I'm a developer, you are a developer. What's the solution? Well, thinking about it, you know, all this data flow that is intercepted by data companies to do stuff with it flows more or less online, on the World Wide Web. So what could we possibly do to change this? And I think it has to do a lot with the World Wide Web itself and with the architecture of the World Wide Web. This is a schematic, very simple, about how the World Wide Web architecture looks like nowadays. It's been created by Sir Tim Berners-Lee himself. And, you know, when we look at it, this is what at the moment facilitates the creation of data monopolies in our society. And we can all agree that it took a very interesting wrong turn how, you know, the World Wide Web is used at the time. And Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who created the web more than 30 years ago, he knows that as well. Yeah? And he's working on a solution because he thinks that we need to go back to what he envisioned in the first place, is that the user is empowered when they use the World Wide Web. So, while it was a research project at the beginning at MIT, what is called SOLID became now a reality. He founded a company called Inrupt, it's the company I work for, to bring this technology into reality and create real-world use cases around it and try to solve or to correct basically the wrong path that the internet took, the World Wide Web took. And yeah, the SOLID protocol, you can imagine it as a layer on top of the World Wide Web stack that we have at the moment. And according to Tim, this layer would bring the web into the next version, and the next official version is 3.0. I will not go into a lot of detail about the SOLID protocol today, but I will mention some of the building blocks that I think are important just to open your mind to the possibility of the future and how the wrong turn could be potentially corrected. So, storage. As developers, I think we heard the first time about the notion of storing data, you know, in our courses. Probably started with relational databases. It evolved over time to NoSQL databases, graph databases. But from the user perspective, I think Dropbox, for example, had an interesting take from what the user sees as a storage. And I personally, I'm a big fan of Google Drive. So I use that as a storage for myself. Also worth mentioning is IPFS, the Interplanetary File System. Why do I mention all these things in the first place? I want to show you that the idea, but also the technical solutions of storage, both in the development world as developers, but also for the users, has evolved over time. And I personally believe that the storage technical solutions are implemented. It's done. It exists. There are solutions that we can move on to make the user experience better. Okay, so the next point, building block that I want to pick on today is the unique identifier. This is a notion related to how we identify ourselves online, our digital identities. This is also nothing new. I could argue that my LinkedIn URL is, for example, how I identify myself in a professional network. It even evolved so much so that when I go to an interview, they ask me to give them my LinkedIn URL so they can check it out. So it is my identity online, you could argue. And also the email address, right? You can use the email address for so many things nowadays. So I think the web identity and your digital identity that also evolved with different standards. For example, the Web ID and the DID are the most recent technological standards, how you could create digital identities for oneself online. So I think this is also there are solutions already technically available. This also has been solved. And then if you pair together the identity that you have online with authentication, technologically we have SSO, right? How simple it is to log in all the services with your Gmail account nowadays, which I love, don't get me wrong. It makes my experience as a user really, really better and faster, not to mention. But in general, authentication has evolved also a very long way. At the beginning, I don't know, we were sending the username and the password unencrypted over the wire, and that's how, people would log in our very basic Struts web applications, a very long time ago. And nowadays, we're talking about tokens, right? So the standards of authentication have evolved to overcome all the hacking possibilities that people also try these days. And this is great. Authentication technologically has also evolved, is still evolving, and the keyword here is auth, right? We have already auth 2.0. And it's all about ID tokens at the end of the day. How many of you have already had to deal with authentication in code? See, it's nothing new, and they're already pretty cool solutions technically. And this brings me to the last building block that I actually want to focus down into. It's authorization. So, authorization. What comes to mind when we think about authorization? I think about access control, I think about permissions, and bottom line is it's this transition between an ID token into an access token. You elevate that token, and theoretically you should be able to not just authenticate, but also be able to authorize the user. So it's all about what can the user do after they have gotten in. Good. To boil it down, let's say we have two users, and these two users want to have a fine-grained access mode to different kinds of data. Read, write of, I don't know, medical data or the photo data. And paired to each kind of an access mode to the data, you would have then a token. And in the middle between the access mode for data and the token, there are these orange square boxes, which I put in access grant. Now, access grant is probably a keyword that you don't hear often or you haven't heard before. And I believe it could possibly be the potential technical missing puzzle piece that we need to fine-grain the authorization and help the user not simply blindly accept all the privacy policy, which, I mean, the privacy policy entails read, write, access, delete of God knows what data, all of the data. And you only have one checkbox or one yes button for all of it, for all the access modes and to all the data. I mean, like, that's insane. Obviously, it doesn't work anymore. It's useless. The privacy policy, let's accept it, is useless. We have to move on, and we have to improve something on the whole user experience. Good. I have prepared a demo application to try to open your minds to this use case flow even more. And again, I'm trying, for example, to find technical solutions here to improve Joan's experience with Streamberry and to not have her land in that situation in the first place. My company develops open source libraries, JavaScript and Java, and there is an Access Grant JavaScript library that basically opens the world for developers into the Solid technology and to use this type of authorization. So I've recorded the demo for time purposes, and I would like to walk you through it. No, there's no sound to this one.
Just in case for another video, here would be the sound.
Okay. Okay, so this is the Solid Client Access Grant JS library, which already contains the demo example code. It's an application, very basic, uses the Express framework, and it has a couple of API calls, just to try to exemplify how it works. I start up the application and it will run on localhost 8080. I go to the browser and immediately I see, very bare bone, 2 links. So here at this point you have to imagine that this is, for example, a book library web application that you want to use, a book library, very simple. So what would the book library do? First and foremost, it would request access from me to see my list of preferred books. So we click on request access, and then you have to input some data. The first field is the resource URL. You know how in Google Drive, when you want to share a piece of data with a friend, it creates a link for you, a URL link. So this is nothing else than exactly that. The only difference is that in Solid, all the data already has a URL. So you don't have to go and create it additionally. It already has that. And this is the link to my book library list. Okay, the next field is my web identity in the Solid world. And it looks like this. This is how I digitally basically identify myself online in this world, in this ecosystem. And it's also a URI, what do you know? And in the background of it, you have the standard of a web ID. I think it went a little bit too fast. Very important, obviously, the application would also have to set the access mode. What does it want from me? And the purposes, very important. Now I have some dummy purposes there, so it's not really related to book library, but hey, they could do some academic research maybe on it, I don't know. And then they hit request access. Okay, good. So this is very much what, for example, the developer has to code up in any service in the future or application, potentially. And what is happening in the background? So a little bit now for our developer minds. I actually show what happens is that this request access will send a post request to the access grant service to issue a request access. I don't want to go into too much detail about this service, but it's also standardized. The underlying standard are verifiable credentials. Now what is more interesting is what it sends over the post request. And this is very familiar. It's a JSON object, and it simply encodes the mode, the link to the resource, what is the purpose, and who does this resource belong to. So it sends this body to the issue endpoint of the access grant service, and then you get in return also JSON object, the actual request access, which is also a JSON object, as I mentioned, just a little bit elevated. And the most important part here is this highlighted line. It also attaches to the JSON data who is requesting this access. And this is the digital identity of the application itself, of the book library web app. So it also has an ID, because we need to know, right? We need to know as a user who is asking for what kind of data. And so on, the link to the resource and the purpose. So now, very dramatically, we switch the view to what the user would see. So let's say that this application that belongs to one of you sent me a request access. Oh, I want to see your book library. And I get a notification, let's say per email, and then I go and I log into this interface we use for this, the pod browser. I log in with my solid web identity, and then I would simply, in a nice hopefully nicer interface in the future, see the request access. I will see that this, one of your application is asking for my permission. The exact application is Timea's app. So again, this is the book library. It lets me choose which is the purpose that I want to allow this service to do or to have on my data. You can also, as a user, input how long they will be able to access the data. So there's a deadline. And then you can also find, if the application uses or tries to access, for example, a whole folder of data, all the pictures from today's conference, you can still fine grain which pictures they are allowed or not allowed to see. And at the end, I could still be like, okay, no, I deny access, or I confirm the access. Okay, so that's pretty much what the user would more or less see. And now we are transferred back to the book library application. And I just printed out for the demo purposes. On the left side, you have the grant. So the grant, which basically went through this whole process of authorization, was elevated from a request access into a grant. And the grant, again, is just a JSON object that encapsulates, encodes all the data that we have seen before. The mode, what is the resource that the user has allowed me to see, and what are the purposes for what the user is okay with me using the data. And on the right side, it's the raw data. Don't be put off by how the raw data looks. It's an interesting format, maybe to you. But the point is that you see it contains the list of books that are some of my favorite books. Obviously, in your web application front ends, you will display this nicer, or you would do some analytics on it for research purposes, I don't know. But that's about it. This is the demo application. Okay, so now if we jump back to the presentation. What happened? What just happened, right? So it was maybe a bit fast, but it was a transition between what your applications would do, request access, and what the user needs to do or can do to allow you to get the data, and for what purposes. So in my example, the book library application tried to read my preferred book library. And I also pasted in some JavaScript code. What are the actual calls that happen here? Obviously, the library tries to make everything easy and familiar for you, regardless what the specifications in the background are. So you will see familiar code with fetch, with JSON objects, and so nothing unusual. And this is, for example, how the application would request access. This is the first call. This is how, what we saw from the user perspective, they would approve or deny the request which issues the grant. And then that grant is sent back to the service and can be used to elevate basically the request session into, I would argue, an access token session and get the data at the end of the day. Okay, and slowly we're getting to the end of the story of Joan, and how could we possibly technically figure out better solutions for our users in the future, and also for me as a user when I browse the internet and I use all these services. I don't think the stories of data monopolies online has to be our future also. I think we can correct it. We just have to create the tech for it and, yeah, also help people find business models around it. So I made it kind of my purpose to try at least to work on it. That's why I luckily landed the job to work more on the solid technology. I wanted to show you today that it doesn't reinvent anything new. It just simply orchestrates together some of the technologies that we already have in place. It puts them together, creates a different protocol, and tries to show people that it's also possible in a different way. So it's all about storing data, identities online, authentication, and authorization. It's also presented as the next layer on top of the web, and as Certeam already says it, the next layer would bring the web into the next version, which is 3.0. Has nothing to do with crypto, obviously. And I personally believe that access grants, so authorization, still needs to evolve technically. What I showed you today with access grants is just, I believe, the beginning, but it will evolve, I'm absolutely sure, and we will have even more control and possibilities to empower the user. So how do we bring about this change in the future? I think it's also a little bit in our hands and up to us. Now you know this technology exists. Maybe you want to geek around it. We have a vibrant community. Everything, all the materials that I showed you also today and everything, is open source. It's, we meet often, we talk, we have demos, we have applications already running. And also, I also pasted here a lot of links from Sir Tim Berners-Lee himself. He's basically talking on the biggest stages of the world, trying to bring this into reality more and more. You can hear directly from him. He opened We Are Developers in July in Berlin. I don't know if any of you have seen it. I know at least one person did. Okay, two. So, I'm just doing a tiny follow-up of what he showed, for example, at the keynote there. Yeah, and we would be very happy, I would be very happy to see some of you in the community and to help you out to try some of our tech. And that's my dog again. Thank you very much.